I want to save some for the seminar. All right, we're pre-gaming a little too hard here.
Well, we got a good little crowd here.
We do. Hey, obviously we appreciate you guys coming out as we always do. Thank y'all for making it. David, hey.
Young man, thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you joining us tonight. What a time to be a Lake Fork fishing fan, right? We got the big boys in town. Bassmaster Elite Series just wrapped up day 2. Man, we've had some unbelievable moments, some very entertaining moments. You know, Lake Fork is fishing tough, and we're going to talk about that some tonight. We're going to talk about why it's fishing tough, how it's fishing tough, what's going on in the water column, and it's really easy to learn a lot if you pay close enough attention to what these guys are doing on the live coverage and everything. You can really get educated on a lot because you see so many different guys approaching it so many different ways, and all of these guys are so good that you can learn. Even from the guys that aren't catching them, you can learn. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot to learn from all of it. So it's been very interesting. We saw probably the greatest guy to ever pick up a bass fishing rod, Rick Clunn, busted open on day 1 with 29 pounds and change, right at 30 pounds. We had 8 guys with over 20-pound bags. And by Lake Fork standards, this is funny to say. This is really funny when you think about it. But by Lake Fork standards, if y'all will remember, when Lake Fork is right in the 2014 TTBC, the guys that were catching 20-pound bags were getting like last.
Yeah.
Like we're like, yeah, it's a good fall tournament. We got 8 guys over 20 pounds on day 1. Well, when Lake Fork's right in the prime time in May, a 20-pound bag will get your butt whipped out here. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it will, and it's just that crazy of a lake. But if you really look, the first thing I want to say is, if you look at what's going on in this fall stretch of the Elite Series, which we've never seen before, none of us have ever witnessed the Elite Series fishing this many tournaments this time of year. And it's all due to, 2020 being as insane as it is. If you look at, they went to Guntersville, they went to Santee Cooper, they went to Chickamauga. Obviously, all 3 of those, you could make an argument for those being some of the best big bass factories. You could make the argument they are the best big bass factory in the country over the last 5 to 10 years. Each one of them. I mean, Santee Cooper had the all-time record until Falcon broke it. And Chickamauga has been kind of considered the best big bass lake in the country the last few years. And Guntersville is Guntersville. I don't think I need to tell you about Guntersville. I mean, everybody knows what Guntersville is. Well, you look at those tournaments, and Santee Cooper, they had a little bit better. They was like 72 or 74 pounds to win Santee Cooper. But it was in the 60s to win a 4-day tournament on Guntersville and Chick. That's 15 pounds a day, 16 pounds a day. And worked out great for all of us from Lake Fork because our very own Lee Livesey won the Chickamauga tournament. Everybody's proud of him. Congratulations to him. We've said it many times, but we'll continue to say it because we're proud for him. But Lake Fork is just a little bit different animal, and it always has been, and as far as I can see, it apparently always will be, because in none of those events at these other big bass factories at the same time of year with these same type of tough fall conditions, none of those other lakes kicked out a 30-pound bag. They did catch a 9.7 on Santee Cooper. I don't know who caught it. I don't remember who caught it, but they caught a 9.7 on Santee Cooper. But Seth Fighter caught a 9.9 here the first few hours of the first day. And who knows what the big fish will be. Somebody's liable to land a 10-pounder by the time it's said and done out here. So Lake Fork, man, oh my gosh. Is it fishing tough? Yeah. Is there some guys going home that didn't make the cut today scratching their head, wondering where the fish are in Lake Fork? Some of the best fishermen? Yep, sure is. But compared to everything else that we can measure in the bass fishing world, there's just no doubt, man, for trophy bass, this is the place to be. And it's just an unbelievable fishery that no matter how bad it seems, it just always finds a way to amaze you and entertain you. And that Rick Clunn day was special. Did you get to see any of that?
I watched it. Yes, I did. I sure did. And
Yeah.
I mean, but what was strong about it, he was only on one dock when he caught those fish on one dock.
He caught the biggest one he caught somewhere else, but all the other fish he caught on one dock.
And so, and I want to interject one other thing that I find rather enthralling in the fact that if you really look at this could have been worse. We haven't had a cold front in 8 days or 9 days.
Very stable weather.
And the next cold front is not till Tuesday. So they got very lucky to fall right into a warming trend, and the water consistently has been warming. So these scores that you're seeing right now, I mean, could have been way worse had they had 2 cold fronts during that 8 or 9 days that we've had in the past, week.
You know, what's funny is I hear you, and I agree with you. But you hear some other guys, and it's just always weird how I'm fishing. There's always these differing opinions of projections and predictions and all that. You listen to Mark Zona, and even I know some other guys that have said this. They're like, well, what we need it to get colder so the fish will group up better. Like, me and David are sitting here going, no, that warm, stable weather is kind of good for the bite. Yes. And those guys are going, we want it to get colder so they'll group. It's just weird how people think that way. I know. I'm with
cringing
you.
around, because I mean, there's been so many small tournaments that we fished here, or people fish here in the last few weeks.
Well, if you get on the wrong side the day after something, it's
I'll give you an example to this. I mean, I had some buddies that I put on some stuff, and there was an insanely good shallow bite here about 2 to 4 weeks ago, all right? And I was catching good fish in 18 inches of water, strangely enough. And I mean, the water temp was 67 degrees, 71 for the first tournament, 62, 63 for the second tournament, which is the Sealy tournament and then the Berkeley tournament, all right? Those fish were still there, all right? And we were going there and catching good quality. I mean, we were catching a lot of trash fish too, the 5, 6, 7 pounders, which he hates, trash fish. I'm a tournament guy here, so those slot fish are trash fish. We're after those giant unders, and these big unders were in these locations. A week and a half later, I send a couple of guys over to these locations where I caught those fish, and the water was down to 51 degrees in this 18 inches of water, and they couldn't get a sniff. Literally couldn't get a sniff. And so now the water temp in those locations right now is back up to 62, 63. Why? Because we've had so much sunshine. But the problem is, I don't think there's anybody back there fishing in those locations. So, which is kind of strange, I thought. But when I was catching 4, 5, and 6, and 7 pounders in there, if the water warms, you seem like they would come back there, is what I would think. I'd love to go up there tomorrow and just make a few casts and check.
There definitely are some guys fishing those types of areas. I don't know what area you're referring to exactly, but there are guys fishing those types of areas. Clark Winlet's fishing the back of a creek, and he's been doing okay. Brandon Polnick's in contention. He's been fishing the backs of creek. He's got 2 creeks he's been fishing in. Brian De Palma started out day one. Did anybody here see that? Brian De Palma started out day one and had 20 pounds faster than you could shake a stick. I mean, like, literally was catching them as fast as his boat official could weigh the fish. He was catching another one. Like, it was insane. And he's actually the boat official who drew Brian De Palma is his tournament partner, a guy that I know personally as well.
Yep. He said he couldn't keep up with it. He was catching them so fast, and he had to slow him down, so he could get the thing weighed, because Brian, I think, is it Greg or is it Brian? Brian? And he has to sign it. He has to sign
Maybe is it Brian or Greg De Palma?
Yeah. And whatever it is, and he's got to sign the thing, And so Curtis said, God dog, man. He said the guy, and every time he gets you signed to get back up there real quick, make another cast, wham! He did this shot after shot after shot. It all happened in like 30 minutes. And he has 16 keepers in 30 minutes with a 7-pounder, and then they just sat around and camped on the spot and didn't even make another cast. He said he just guarded it.
And the ironic part is, he went there this morning.
No fish.
They're gone.
Yeah.
And that brings me to tonight's topic. Probably the longest intro we've ever had. But what I want to talk about tonight is a couple different things. One is the power of winding baits that look like shad this time of year. I want to talk about the power of that. And I also want to talk about what is it that makes fall fishing so unpredictable and so difficult. Why are we seeing all of these touring pros go to all these big bass factories, and the majority of them are flat out struggling? Whole field struggled at Chick and Gunnersville. Most of the field struggles at Santee and here. Why is that happening? So we're going to talk about that tonight. Another example of that is Rick Clun, who caught the amazing 30-pound bag on day one. We're going to call it 30. It's 29 change. We're going to give King Clun a few ounces and call it 30. You know what I mean? But the 30-pound bag. And then today he caught like
7
pounds or 8 pounds. What was it, 7 pounds?
7 something. Yep.
7 something. What was what he caught today? And he only had 3 keepers or 4 keepers?
I don't remember. I just knew
it wasn't a limit. I think it was 3 fish for 7 pounds. Now, he did have a moment today. He had a moment this morning where he hooked up on like an 8-pounder. I'm guessing it was about an 8-pounder just by looking at it. You can't ever tell on camera. It might have been a 10 and it might have been a 7, but it was in that range. It wasn't a 6. It was just too big. But we got a good look at it on camera when it rolled and stuff. And it just came unbuttoned. And he talked about it. He said, I saw the fish come up and jump, I saw the fish come up again and kind of roll. He said the fish had a treble hook. He was fishing square bill crankbait. He said he had a treble hook on each side of the mouth. He was pinned. I thought he was mine. Rick Glun's probably fished a crankbait more than everybody in this room has combined. For sure he has, Like he's caught 1 million crankbait fish. And he said, man, I just thought he was pinned. I thought he was mine. And he said he didn't really pull hard. He didn't jump. He just turned and came loose. And I don't know why and I don't know how, but it's one of those things that happen. And he also said on stage, I was at weigh-in, he said that, this is a sport, and it's like any other sport. There is momentums. And even though I've kind of been there and seen all of it at this point in my career and seen it 1 million times over, he goes, you have to get over that. You have to overcome that and keep fishing. But, man, he said, I just never got right after that. Like, when it happened, it definitely had a negative effect on my mental momentum, my mental outlook on things. And he never really recovered today from that. So, knowing Rick Clun, he's liable to come back out tomorrow and catch 35. Who knows? And then if he does, he's right back in it, right? So, we'll see how that works out. He definitely did make the cut. He's still in the top 10. I think he's in like 5th or 6th or something like that. But it's just a prime example. And Lake Fork's kind of notorious for that here today, gone tomorrow scenario. All the pressure lake gets in that. But all these lakes do this in the fall. And why do they do that? Well, to me, there's a couple different scenarios that you can look at. It's two different things. It has to do with the bait fish and the bass's relationship to bait fish in the fall, and it has to do with the weather in the fall. The weather, we all know this, in the South, everywhere, Texas and everywhere across the South, in the fall, the weather might be 80 degrees today and 40 degrees tomorrow. And it might be 40 degrees in the morning and 80 degrees at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There's so much change in the water column so fast this time of year. Well, that is obviously going to move things around in the water column. It's going to pull fish in, push fish out. It's going to make fish rise, make fish drop. It's going to really make fish mobile. The other thing is the bait fish factor, right? These bait fish, these bass get so locked into these bait fish in the fall. They come out of summer. It's the first time they felt good, first time they felt good oxygen levels, first time they felt good water temps in a long time. And they're hungry from surviving the summer, from barely eking through summer with their metabolisms high in the heat, and they can't feed efficiently enough, and they lose weight. They're starving to death, literally. They're hungry. They feel good. All they care about on earth is a school of bait fish in the fall. It's the only thing they care about. And that's why they hunt shad so specifically in the fall, because they want to eat big amounts of food in big numbers. They want that big number of bait fish all at once. And they're just not going to get that with a brim or a crawfish or a frog or anything else that a bass might eat. It's more of a one-at-a-time meal. And a shad, they can just school up and gorge on them. And so they get so locked in. Well, guys, shad, we think bass are dumb. Like, they eat plastic and metal every day or we wouldn't be here. You know what I mean? They are dumb animals. But shad are even more dumb. Like, they're really dumb. And shad will literally just drift around in a creek or in a vast area with the sunshine. I mean, if the sun shines a certain way, the shad will just go over there. Or the wind blows a certain way, the shad will just go over there. And so a group of shad can get up and move from one corner of a creek to the other, or one section of a creek to the other, sometimes for no apparent reason. So when you have reasons that are making them move that you're trying to stay up with, and then you have them locked into bait fish that are moving for no good reason sometimes, it becomes a little bit of a roll of the dice and a crapshoot to figure out where are these fish going to be located. Take Brian De Palma day one, sets up on that bridge, whacks them, catches them faster than his boat official can weigh them. That area where that bridge is, there is a ton of grass north of it, quite a bit of grass south of it, and timber all around it, immense amounts of timber. Those fish that are on that bridge can make 2 kicks of a tail and be in 4 different massive varieties of cover. Like that. So those fish are not going to be on that bridge every day. They were on that bridge the first day, and he whacked them. And then they moved. He might pull in there tomorrow morning and catch 30 in the first hour. Who knows? Those fish might be back there. The problem is you got these vast areas on these lakes like Fork that have immense timber fields, immense grass flats, all this massive amount of cover where these bait fish and bass can move. And when these bass are following these bait fish, man, will they move. It becomes a crapshoot to try and locate them day in, day out. We all experience it in the fall. You have one day that's great, the next day that's terrible, and even the best in the world do it, and we've seen that the last 2 days. That's what's going on. So I know I've kind of went on a filibuster here. It's political season. I've been on a filibuster.
Don't get me started on that, please.
Yes, no, we're not talking politics tonight.
No.
I did that earlier this week, and I almost got kicked off YouTube. You don't even know about this.
Oh.
Did anybody see that video?
One of the best videos I've watched you make.
There you go. One of the best videos I've ever. YouTube deleted it about 4 hours after I made it.
No
That's how
way.
bad it was.
Wow.
For those that missed out, I'm sorry, but we can't do it again. There's kids in the room.
The fact that they deleted it is why it was one of the
But you know something, you're talking about that with him over there on that bridge. The pressure that area has gotten in the
it gets
past
a lot, yeah.
4 days. I'm gonna give it 4 days. Practice and all that has got to account for something in that area, because there was way more boats than that in that area, and then they had other guys coming in there in that area during the day. And I know that Zaldane came in there where he was, and my tournament partner was in the boat, and he had a comment about what was going on with that, and something kind of happened that he thought was kind of way off the cuff, that in that moment, and he said, "Wow, I can't believe that guy would do that," and and so I thought,
Who would do that? Is that it?
that Zaldane, yeah, would do, and
Well, now you got to tell us what happened.
well, I mean, when Zaldane went by De Palma, he asked, I said, "How you doing, man?" And De Palma said, "Yeah, I'm doing pretty daggum good." So Zaldane put it in neutral, flipped the troll motor over, cast right to where he's casting.
For reals?
For real. And Curtis said, "I cannot believe he did that."
Well, that 100% looks exactly like what you said it looks like.
Probably not.
But
We'll give Curtis a 20 or 30% fudge factor in
But
there also.
I will say this. I know where Zaldane started on day one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and you know this because you know what bridge Brian De Palma was on.
Yep.
It was the next bridge over. He was just past it, fishing the creek channel. He was doing the exact same thing Brian De Palma was doing on the next bridge over.
Okay.
And so he may have literally just been running that pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I just thought that was kind of strange. Now, if they're friends or whatever the case, that's a different story. I don't know. I didn't even ask that. But that's a tough life that those guys have to deal with.
Man, I'm telling you.
Can't get any tougher. I mean, whether you're friends or not, you're making a living out there, and you have sponsors to answer to, and I don't envy them one bit. I've seen Iconelli and Van Dam before just go at each other's throat out on a spot at one of those tournaments, throwing hair jigs one time. And I mean,
You're not part of this community.
It was.
Anybody remember that comment? Kevin Van Dam told Iconelli, "You're not part of this community."
Yeah, I mean,
he goes, "It's a community hole, Kevin." He goes, "You ain't part of this community."
I mean, it was bad. Watching that. So
That's one of the best comeback lines ever.
yeah. So I don't. I
You
just
talking about hard life and bad. Can you do something with that? You know what to do with that?
get it apart. I can get it apart.
Just go like this.
There it is. But
Man, they are locked in there.
I mean, that happens all the time. That even happens to us in the tournaments where we fish bass champs. We fish all those type of tournament trails and everything, and that can happen. And even guiding. I'm gonna give you an example. I mean, I'm sitting on.
he hole jumps me every week.
I'm sitting on a spot. Well, I did that one time for sure.
I don't even remember what he's talking about. That's hilarious. I was joking. I don't even know what you're talking about.
You caught the 6-pounder. I caught a 7-pounder. Yeah.
Oh, you did hole jump me that day.
We happened to, I didn't know he was even in that area, and I pulled in there, and I see him up there, but I said, I'm going right over there. He's way over there.
And we were fishing it was the guides tournament for the charity, for our charity tournament this year. And David had caught like the first 2 fish of the day on some main lake spot. I didn't know where it was. I was still
we had
running.
The first 2 fish.
I was still on plane when David reported sent the first 2 fish in, and I pulled in there. The first fish we catch is like 6 3/4.
Yeah, you caught a 6 something. Yeah.
6 something, like a heavy 6 in there, and I'm like, yeah, boy. And then we catch a couple more, and they're just not quite keepers. Then we catch a 2-pounder, and then David shows up, and then the sucker catches a 7-pounder and beats my big fish.
Didn't I tell you though that I wouldn't be? I told him I'd be over. I told him, not knowing he was going to be there, I'd probably go to this second area I'm going to by 8 o'clock.
No, you said no.
I said 9 o'clock.
No, he said he would be in there by 9 o'clock. I said, great. That's about the time I've been leaving that area.
Right.
I'll pull in there. We catch a 6 3/4, and 20 minutes later, he's there. So we sit, and keep in mind, this is MLF. Like, we're texting in these weights. So we ping the board with a big 6. And then 20 minutes later, David's already there.
Well,
I'm like, bro, it's 7:30.
We hit our spot.
You're supposed to be here at 9.
I told him the reason behind this wasn't that I went to my first spot, my key spot, and there was 2 boats sitting on it. So I had a backup spot. So we go over there and I catch these 2 fish, or my tournament guys, and we catch these. And then there was nothing else after that. We gave it another 15, 20 minutes, and I said, let's go. I know where some are. And so we run up there.
No, what I want to know once and for all, I need to like hook the lie detector up, tell the truth, because I don't really care. You know me, I don't care. But I want to know once and for all, when that fish went across the scales and the text went out, did that have anything to do with you coming up there?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
100%.
I didn't really think it did, but it sure did make for a good story.
All I saw was we had like 7 pounds, and then he has 7 or 9 pounds. I didn't think twice about it. I mean, matter of fact, I didn't even know it.
He didn't know it was on one fish, and I had just got off plane.
Until I got up there, and then he said he caught a 612. And I was like, well, that's pretty good. Wait a minute, get the net.
He
7
did.
pounder.
And then we both got beat in the last like 5 seconds of the tournament.
And then I'm sitting on the spot. At the very end of the day, I'm leading. And then
I was behind him by less than like a pound or
and
like
then
2
here
pounds.
comes Jonathan Bowling. We got 30 minutes left.
And John's behind him by like 3 or 4 pounds.
And I'm sitting on the spot that I've been catching them on. Also, what turns out, Jonathan Bowling started on that spot that morning. All right, it's a deep spot, so we're throwing on it. Here he comes. He pulls up. He's about 50 yards from me, idling around. I told my guy, I said, look, he's just idling. He's idling. There ain't no fish over there. And so we keep on throwing. Next thing you know, Jonathan flips over the trolling motor, and they're casting, and I'm talking to my guy, and next thing I know, they're bowed up over here, and he boats a 5.5 pounder, just gets right by me.
With literally like 5 or 10 minutes left in the tournament, and he caught it right in front of him.
Right in front of me, he catches it.
And I'm up the lake, and I'm running in going, man, we got second. Oh, well, we got second. Then I get to get right here to the marina. They're like, no, Jonathan. Well, I'm like, Jonathan? I didn't even thinking about Jonathan. Where was he at? Yeah, he came back and won. It was awesome, though. It was a lot of fun. It sure was.
Yeah, that guy outbid me because I was bidding on J-Bo that day.
Were you?
And that joker outbid me the last minute deal, and I was so pissed. Some guy from Dallas, he didn't even look like he ever even knew how to fish. I'm like, and then I heard the J-Bo won. I was like, God.
I was blown away. He pulled up on that, and I was on the end of the point.
Hey, that little young
with the
fella.
boat setting in like 17 foot, throwing into 21, 22, and he pulls up on the top of the hump or the flat right there in 14, 15 foot, and he graphed around, and he must have saw something, obviously, and he used his electronics to kick my butt.
He's really, really good
Yeah,
for his
yeah, so-
especially for his age. Like
He's got an overactive mind, I'd say.
he does. He's very young. He's only 21 years old. He's a very talented fisherman. Very talented. Yep, for sure.
We deviated.
Anyway, the difficulties of fall. We'll go back to that. I finally got all of my big ball of doo-doo separated from each other. So before we move on to that, let's talk a little bit about what the leader's doing. There's something going on this lake right now that I don't really fully understand, if I'm honest with you guys. And some guys may disagree with me on this, but for me, my history here, when the water gets down into the 60s, which it is well into now, easily into, when the water gets down into the 60s and we get into November, like right now, I always tell people the best fall bites from October 15 to Thanksgiving. We're right slap in the middle of that. We are in the peak of the normal fall period. The water's in the 60s. That's the water temp I look for the fish to be grouped up. That is what this is. Everything is where it should be for it to be the peak of the fall bite to me right now. That doesn't mean it's easy. Fall bites aren't easy. Fall bites are awesome when you got them, and they're terrible when you don't. Some of the best days and some of the worst. Either way, I don't understand why this is happening. The offshore fish, I personally have not seen any what I would consider big schools of offshore fish. And there's not always a lot of big offshore schools in the fall, but there's usually a few that you can find if you look hard enough.
I might have an answer to that.
The fish in the backs of the creeks are not herding in big giant schools. That's not happening. I don't know why. There is a massive amount of bass on this lake right now that are tweeners. They're just in between. They're in mid depths. They're on boat docks. They're on timber. They're on creek bridges. The bridges that go halfway through the creek on. There's a bridge. There's fish on all those, and none of them are in big groups. Like Clun caught 4 fish off one dock. That's the most fish I've heard of. That's the most fish of any size I've heard of being caught off one dock. But he's Rick Clun, so he does things a little bit better than the rest of us do. But I really don't understand why it is that way. But there is a lot of fish that are just in kind of in between areas. And we see that, right? With the Elite Series, a lot of the guys that are having moderate to good success in this tournament are fishing that kind of stuff. They're fishing boat docks with a little bit of depth on them, maybe some brush on them, whatever have you, and they're grinding and fishing all these boat docks and getting 7 or 8 bites a day and coming out of there with 15 to 20 pounds. You know, that's kind of what the guys that are doing good outside of this one guy are doing. Patrick Walters is doing something completely different. I'm going to have a video on Monday. I went around the lake all day today, going to the areas where these guys had been at after they were gone, and kind of breaking down the areas and talking about what the leaders have been doing, what Rick Clunn's been doing, what Patrick Walters has been doing, what De Palma's been doing. I went to all these areas these guys have been fishing long after they were gone. I didn't interfere with what they were doing at all, and I didn't make a cast in those areas either. But I went around and kind of broke those areas down and show you. So it's going to be a really in-depth, detailed video coming up on Monday. I think it's some of the best informative content we've ever done, so make sure you guys check that one out. But Walters is catching these fish in main lake stands of timber. I mean, how much more random do you get of an area than that? They're not correlating to a point, they're not correlating to a hump or a creek bend, or they're just main lake stands of timber. And he is basically sight fishing with a Garmin live scope. He's going around and seeing trees that have fish on them. He sees the fish on his live scope. He throws his jerkbait out there. He twitches his jerkbait. He sees his jerkbait. He sees the fish either react to that jerkbait or stay on the tree. And if it'll react, he'll keep twitching it. That fish keeps coming with it. He'll keep twitching it. And a lot of those fish end up biting. And that is how he is essentially catching all of his fish. Despite what he told the article guys. He's a little bit of a sneaky one, that Patrick Walters, because if you read his article on Bassmaster last night or this morning from his day one success, it goes, oh, it's an obvious area, you know, what I would consider an obvious area, which leads you to think like a main lake point or something, right? You know, something obvious, a point, a hump, something obvious. And I'm just fishing standing timber in 20 foot of water, and the fish just have to be in the right position to catch them. When they get in the right position, I'm catching them. Like, I'm throwing a spinner bait and a jerk bait and a drop shot, that's what he said. Well, bro, he didn't throw none of that. He threw a jerk bait today. That's what he caught every fish on the day was a jerk.
Well, he was only lying a little bit.
Yeah, he just wasn't. And it's not an obvious area, guys. There's no some. Now he does go across some points, and it's not a spot. It's an area that he's fishing of timber, and a lot of it, the majority of it, is just kind of flat, gentle, sloping ground. Nothing special there. He's just able to see these fish on that live scope, and that's how he's catching them.
What makes it interesting to me with this is because of the fact that you can't catch them deep, you can't catch them shallow, then where else is there? And
in between.
He's taken this in between and dialed it into magic, is what he's done.
Well, he's used that advantage of the modern equipment.
Yeah, with that, I mean, it is so amazing, you know, that he's figured this out. And these guys are brilliant, and they haven't done that as far as that goes. But with the deeper fish, right now, those fish should be in specific areas. Guaranteed in 17 to 20 foot, they're not there. Why? Because I have not seen barfish nowhere on these locations. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, no barfish. Why aren't the barfish there? And I mean, some places they are, but a lot of places they aren't.
A lot of places they aren't.
Key
That's true.
places they should be, they aren't.
Well, and I have seen some. I don't mean to contradict you anyway here, but I have seen some, and I've even taken my kids out and letting them catch some. But that being said, they are nowhere near the massive quantities.
Yeah.
Like these areas that I'm fishing are like the best white bass, yellow bass areas every fall, and they are nowhere near the amount of quantity that you normally see this time of year.
Yeah, because what I normally do is these certain places where these fish are, I'll bring a little bitty spoon about this big.
That's what I do with my kids. I let them go there with a
and
jigging
put it on
spoon.
a light line, and I'll get on these spots and I'll throw it, and I'm looking to catch the yellow bass that are that big. And if I can catch those fish, those yellow bass that big, then you can put on a 10XD crankbait that looks exactly like it, and or Carolina rig, and you can stroll those areas or long cast and long line them or whatever the case, and usually catch big bass on those places. But those things have to be there first. I even went to the point of, nobody else knows this, should I even say this? A sabiki rig. You know what a sabiki rig is?
Yeah, Japanese
Little sabiki rig,
catching
6 hooks on it.
fly.
And I wanted to know what they were and how big they are. And so I dropped that thing down there and tick, tick, and you reel it up, and then you'll see exactly what size they are based off of that. And then when I get it,
What size line you throw that on?
A sabiki rig? Actually, 20 pounds.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm in. I'm in then.
But
Sold.
the sabiki rig is actually like 8 pound or 6 pound line. if you know what a sabiki rig is, but it's at the number 12, little bitty tiny feathered hooks, and now just tie, it's got a 1 ounce weight on the bottom and then a swivel on the top, and you just tie it on 20-pound line, just let it down there, and then you feel tick, 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 and then reel it up, and you can see what they look like.
I can't even spell sabiki rig.
And so, it's a way to determine if that's down there in order to go ahead and work on these fish with a crankbait or an 1.25 ounce chatterbait. How many of y'all got one of those in a boat?
Or a big spoon.
There he goes. Or a big spoon, exactly, a floater spoon.
Yeah, and speaking of bigger crankbaits, that's what Clun's been using. And I wanted to get to this. I kind of forgot to get to it earlier, so I want to talk about it now. I like I told you guys, I went around and making that kind of vlog documentary video of this tournament event, right? Well, I went around to these places, and I went around to the spot where Clun lost that big one this morning, right? And some of that stretch of docks where he caught all those fish yesterday. And I saw something in there that made me go, oh, poor Mr. Clun. Poor Mr. Clun. Because what we were talking about earlier, those shad moving, right? Those shad moving. Well, it's one of those, that stretch of docks where he lost that big one this morning. There's a little creek channel. It's a subtle creek channel, but there's a little drain, little creek channel that runs right in front of all those docks. If you paid attention, he was actually thrown to the dock and fishing all the way back out to his boat. He was a ways out from the dock. He was cranking across that creek channel is what he was doing, that little drain. And those bait fish been hanging around that drain, right? And he's using these oversized square bills. This is... Back in the day, this was just your normal, that's a big crankbait, that's a square bill. That's your normal standard square bill 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years, whatever it was. Then we kind of went up to the 2.5 size. And then after that, we kind of got to this 3.3 or 3.8. And that's one of the ones Clun's using, not the exact model, but that's the size. This is the 6 cents version. You guys know I use 6 cents hard baits. And Clun uses some Japanese companies, Imishikawa, I don't know, something else I can't spell. I need to take Hooked on Phonics, I think. Anyways, that's a 3.8 mini mag. This is around a 3-inch crankbait. That's the primary one that he's using, of course. And then he's using a really, really big one that's not quite this big, but it's pretty close. And that's a giant square bill, as you guys can see. This is the 6-inch Cloud 9 Magnum square bill. These square bills will get down to 8-10 foot of depth on the right setup, and I really think he's using these bigger square bills that are getting deeper. This one won't quite get that deep, but the one that's a little bit about the exact same body size as this that Clun's fishing, that Japanese brand, it's got an extended bill and it's got a sloped head that kind of works as more bill, and it does get down, from what it says on their website, 8 to 10 foot. I kind of researched their little profile on that bait on the line last night. But he's cranking. He's around, fall fishing. He's doing, winding things, man. He's got big schools of bigger bait. He's around schools of big bait. That's the key. The bait that's maybe not quite the size of your hand, but pretty darn close to the size of your hand. Those normal gizzard shad, not the big giant ones, but the normal gizzard shad that we have so much of in this lake. And the reason I know he's around those is because I wasn't on the water at all yesterday. But today, when I was in there, where he lost that big one, right back out from that, not too far, but just far enough that he didn't fish it. As I went in there, did what I need to do with the camera. I was idling out, and I see thunk, 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 these gizzard shad go to skipping on the surface in this timber that goes around this creek channel. And Clun, this is how close. This is what people miss in these tournaments. What we all miss in these tournaments is there's so much that goes on that we don't see, that this guy was that close to opening up. Clun fished a stretch of docks on this side of the creek. He fished a stretch of docks on this side of the creek, fished that creek channel. Well, there's another creek channel that runs from the other corner and runs across the creek and goes like this. Clun actually went from that stretch of docks, fished this part of the creek channel, then went to his other docks with the creek channel in front of him. That's how he went. Well, right up here, after those creek channels joined, right up here is where all that bait was. And when I saw that, I just eased over there, and I had my graphs off. But I turned my graphs on. There was nobody in there at the time. I eased over there, and I kind of just graphed around just to see, all that bait was right there. And I mean all of it. All of it. 100,000%. If Clun takes his crankbait another 100 yards up that creek channel that morning, he's right back where he was. Because those fish are moving with that bait. And that bait was, I guarantee you, was more relating closer to those docks and those other channels. And when it pulled out into that creek channel this morning out there, for whatever reason, because they're stupid in their shad, one of the greatest, maybe the greatest angler of all time, he was that close.
Well,
because he even had the thought. He fished a big part of that creek channel in between those docks, and literally, like right where those creek channels joined, if he'd have went up another 50, 100 yards, he'd have ran into him.
If you remember, at Falcon, he did that exact same thing at Falcon.
And the only reason that I know, has nothing to do with me being better than Rick Clunner, or as good as Rick Clunner in the neighborhood. The only reason I know is because as I idled out of there, 3 shad and went thunk, thunk, thunk. And when they started skipping across the surface, I took my electronics over there and saw them. That's the only reason I even know. I would have never known those were there. I guarantee you, I'll be in there looking around on my graph for shad come Monday. When this tournament's over. I'm going to go graph that creek channel and find them shads, son. But anyway, but yeah, I thought that was really interesting when I saw that. And when I saw it, it was like, ding. Man, that sucks for Mr. Clun. Because he was right there. He even is so smart and so good that he got it. If they're not on this stretch and they're not on this stretch, they got to be in that timber in that channel. He went out there and fished and caught one keeper in it, but he went out there and fished that channel, and he just missed the sweet spot where those shad were today. He just missed it. And that's how it happens, and that's how close he was. And that's the heartbreak of tournament bass fishing. But let's talk about the power of winding baits for a little bit. Winding baits. By winding baits, I mean crankbaits, chatterbaits, swim baits. Jerkbait's not really a winding bait, but it's a moving shad replication. Shad replicating baits that move. Let's talk about the power of those in the fall. I, hands down, throw more hard baits in the fall than I do any other time of year. And all of the ones I throw look like this. I mean, these are the ones I'm throwing right now, guys. These are all, you'll hold a couple of these for me? I mean, I'm throwing all of these baits right now. They all look like shad. They're all white. They all look like shad, and they're all moving baits, right? And they're all a little different.